Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer, my good buddy and person who I completely holistically understand. Michael Wan is here with me. This is episode number 32 of Project Kids. Good morning, Michael. It's Tuesday morning.
Good morning, Emily. And so I just want to give like a little insight into, or maybe context to what you just said. So prior to us starting to record, we had a conversation. And you were like, listen, I'm just going to call you out. This is what I see about you and how I understand you, Mr. Mike Wan. And you said it you said it as if you were reading my own understanding of my own behavior. And so that's a really, really it's two things. It's first thing is like to receive that, that feels really cool. Like that's like what it means to be witnessed. Like, wow, yeah, that's how I see myself. You see that too. So like that there's something that happens to the individual, like when someone does that for you. And then secondly, to be able to do that requires a very keen and unattached inner over and understanding of a person. And not everyone has that capability. And so I saw that today and I was like, wow, I was impressed. So that was a great way. That's what the comment was in the beginning, what you're talking about, seeing you holistically. So I felt that. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, I've always been like, my father's always called me an observant little fuck, right? But because he couldn't get away with anything when I was a kid, like I would catch every little thing. But as I've gotten older and I've gotten to know myself better, and I've gone through some of the discomfort of being honest with myself and then like owning up to my own reality, it's given me like a really good ability to assess other people, not from this way of like trying to psychoanalyze them or whatever, but just so that like I can come into acceptance of who people are, where they're at, so that I don't have unreasonable expectations of a person that causes me unnecessary suffering, right? And creates a lot of like unnecessary drama. And the other thing is like, especially in the kind of relationship you and I have, like, I think there's a bunch of like underlying things. There's things related to the past. There's things related to our work. There's things related to where we think we are going. But I think the main thing is basically like trying to like decide what we think is true for ourselves, right? About like ourselves, the entire being, and the greater reality, right? And then how do we walk that walk in the most amount of integrity? And that doesn't mean that everything is perfect and there's not disappointments or whatever, but like, allowing each other room to like make mistakes, course correct, acknowledge them, find the humor in them, find the dark shit, whatever kind of stuff, but like allowing the person the room, and then also like being vulnerable and taking the risk of saying how you really feel about what the person is doing, right? But not from the place of like trying to manipulate them into changing it and doing it the way you want or whatever, just like saying what you see and not expecting like necessarily a satisfactory response, just being okay with the fact that you said it and that's true for you, and like letting the other person do that as well, right? And so I to me that's like one of the most treasured gifts you can have in a friendship, is to do that. Yeah, that's all.
You speak the truth. You speak the truth. That's really like as a model to meet another person. It's you succinctly described like everything you say. You're like, yep, that's all true. But this is the thing which I want to point out, which I think is so interesting too, is you framed it up originally like, I'm doing this for me. The reason why I'm meeting these other people in this, like where they are and trying to understand who and what they are, is so that I know how to manage that. Like it does come from this like self-focus. You do it for yourself. And there's something which is really ironic or paradoxical about that, because it's absolutely true, is like the whole problem where you get you get into problems with other people because you start to do, you're thinking you're doing something for them.
Right.
And like, that's when you lose that, like, no, I've got to ground it into myself. And we're kind of conditioned to think that that sounds selfish. Like that's something that you don't want to do, but it's actually the opposite. It's like by doing that, I can go and meet people exactly where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is like, I think we, as people get into trouble in relationships when we try to hold people responsible for an idea of them that we have in our own minds, as opposed to holding them responsible for who they say they are. Right. Right. And when you start to do that, when you start to hold yourself responsible for who you say you are and hold them responsible for who they say they are, there becomes like a lot less to sort of argue about, first of all. Right. And then also, like, if things don't work out somehow or whatever, it's a lot less, like, I don't want to say painful, right? But there's like, it's a lot cleaner sort of pull away that allows for each person to self-reflect and maybe later revisit the situation without all of that chaos and drama that comes from having unreasonable expectations of a person that are based on your needs as opposed to their reality, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I would say it's definitely cleaner. And to define that is when you begin to project, and we all, like, you know, we've all done this, do this, what have you, you know, this is what a blind spot is. We don't do this purposefully. Like if we're going to project something on someone else, and that happens in any relationship, what you're projecting is, like, by definition, your shadow. And so like you're linking that, like you're pulling, like it creates this kind of like this self-fulfilling prophecy. And so if you've connected with someone like that, a part of you is in that person, right?
Yeah.
Like in your own mind, like, you know, you become part of me in this like weird shadow projection sort of way. And so when that relationship goes away, like there's literally a part of you that's going away. And so that's where it's like all of this, like, oh, you know, but when you don't have that, what you described is, this is how you don't project.
Right.
You see it as it is, and you know yourself well enough to know like your tendencies of projection. Like this is how you navigate that. And the cleanness is the fact that, like, if it, you know, whatever, like relationships could be a second or a lifetime, you know, and everywhere in between, like you can walk away from it without having that sort of attachment. Like I think it's a very clean and self-serving, like, and healthy way or model to go and think about all of the relationships. So definitely. And I've got a great story. Like before, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that, but this story that happened this weekend fits into this so perfectly.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that it took me a long time to get to this place, and I'm still working on it. But like, I kind of understand the model more now, right? Kind of thing, if there's such a thing. Like I used to have really unreasonable expectations of other people, and a lot of them were unspoken expectations, which is doubly bad. How can a person live up to something that they don't even know you expect for them? And like how, like some of my expectations were unreasonable, right? And so it's been through a lot of like mistakes and heartaches, and then like an extreme, you know, the more I get, the farther away I get from my like really heavy drug use period, like the more I see it as it was like a form of like a hermetic experience, because I was so isolated and so in my head and just observing things. Like, I mean, if I had life to do over again, I might make different choices, but I don't regret any of the choices that I have made. And the amount of observation and self-analysis and time I spent with myself in that space, right? And like was very like it allowed me to really observe some things that had gone on in my life from this more like third person or neutral space that drugs sort of take you out of yourself. And I'm not recommending this to people, but it's just the truth of what happened. And so on the other side of that, like I have that, you know, that I don't forget those things that I thought about when I was in that space, right? And so that has helped me to sort of begin to resolve some of that stuff, but it doesn't take away some of the fear that happens at the moment when you have to tell someone the truth about yourself or about how you feel about things. It's uncomfortable, But what I have found is like we live in this fear that it's going to be this huge discomfort and the discomfort is going to go on forever and ever. And that's not true. It's kind of like the same way that like that they scare us about this and scare us about that. And it's usually something this big, right? The discomfort is very temporary. It's very short. And, that's it. And generally like it doesn't continue to recur. There might be a new thing that you have to be uncomfortable for a few minutes about, but it's generally short and actually surprisingly people mostly respect it. And when they don't, it's clear why they don't. So it doesn't even bother you. And also, I'm surprised at how well people respond to it. I sometimes am expecting that that person's going to blow out or freak out or whatever, but I've become okay with it. And then they totally don't. They're like, okay, that I wasn't expecting that. Let me think about it a minute. And generally I get a neutral to positive response back. Right. And yeah, so yeah, so that's that. And you had a story you wanted to share.
Just two things before I start the story. So the lack of regret is that I've had that conversation with two different people this week. And what I'm coming to realize is like not I've heard I hear so often people like speak about like, regret type of sort of things. Like, if I would have done this differently, that sort of stuff. They might not use the word regret, but what they're describing is the state of regret. Like that's the craziest thing in the world. Like when looking at your life, like coming to own your stuff, there can't be any regret. Like it doesn't serve any sort of purpose. Like that happened and you can't do it over because now like it would never be the same. All you can do is like, what would I do if a similar situation presented itself again?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that's when they're like the experience serves you as opposed to hold you back. And then the second thing I want to say was without a doubt, like, looking at life experiences, within our own individual journey as like what were my hermetically sealed transformative times, and they're usually like the toughest times.
Yeah.
And it's just as what you're saying. Like, I mean, really this is straight from the book, The Alchemist, like to speak the language of the world, or the language of the world is courage. And in order to live from that, like a personal legend perspective, that's the language from that book, is like, you have to go through this thing. And that's what we're describing. So that being said, so the story, this is so, this fits into what we're describing because this is another side of that same coin, but not so introspective. And it's like this is Mike's way of like in practice of understanding all relationships in this, like, I'm meeting whatever or whomever as it is, and like having a good eye, if you will, of being able to recognize, like, quickly what and who someone is, or at least to begin the dance. So, all right. So this past Saturday, or Sunday, I have a tour, which I'm giving at one of the rites locations. It's the Rite of Destruction. It's the first one. And it kind of has like some dark undertones, but it's also the richest of all the tours I give, like riches in terms of, it's got the most amount of like juice and interesting things to look at and talk about and experience. So, all right. So there's this couple who they booked this like maybe about 2 months ago, and they're coming up from Florida. And everything about it has been like, there's this magnetism, like, I was interested. I'm like, wow, they're coming up from Florida. Like, I'm interested in that. Like, they seem to be very interested in having this experience. But along the way, they're like all these sort of like hiccups, like weird, like kind of like hiccups, primarily with timing. I showed up the previous weekend thinking that's when it was, like I was all out. And so this was the weekend it was supposed to come. And then like all of a sudden, like one of my boys, like his soccer team got into like a postseason sort of tournament. Like, the game was like a big game was right before. I'm like squeezing it in, like all this stuff is happening. And then they send me a text. They're like, we got stuck in traffic. We're going to be an hour late. I'm like, this is perfect. Like, it's this weird dance with like time.
Right.
So I got an extra hour to kill. and I'm hungry. I need to get some food inside me. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going through this process. What are my options? What do I want to put inside me? Blah, 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 blah. And what came to the top of the list is this. So it's this kind of like mom and pop convenience store sort of thing, and it borders a trailer park. So it's this trailer parks kind of like convenience store deli sort of thing. Like it's kind of rough and tumble. It's on the outskirts of town, but they make really good chicken. Like it's like an insider's thing. Like most people wouldn't go there, but so I'm like, I'm going there. So I pull up. And I pull up in my truck, and when I get out of the truck, there are like 3 tables out in front of this kind of like shacky looking building, and they're like jammed close next to each other. And they're like these five boys, like maybe about 14 years old, on BMX bikes. And then there was this like tough as nail biker dude, like real deal biker dude. Like you see his Harley out in front, looks like he's like 65 years old. He's got his sunglasses on. He's got like his club jacket on with like, you know, some sort of like intimidating thing. And he's just sitting there. Big dude sitting. So I like walk by them. I go and I get my chicken. And I come out, and as soon as I walk out the door, and I'm like, I don't want to eat my truck. I don't, you know, I'm sophisticated. So
yeah.
so like, as soon as
I'll sleep in it, but I won't eat in it.
So as soon as I walk out, all the BMX kids, they like take off. They take off. And then it's like, but it's like me and the biker dude. And this guy is like the way this chairs are sort of situated, you would look one way, and he has this chair situated another way where he's looking off into the horizon, like totally like, you know, straight out of a movie. And so I'm like, you know, because I'm like, how am I going to meet this? I'm like, I'm going to meet this in the exact same friggin' energy. So I go and I mirror this guy, like, and I'm doing this in the most respectful way because he's a badass. This dude was tough. And I'm like, I want to step into a little bit of that, you know, this John Wayne-esque sort of thing, this like loner. So I go and I sit down and I like mirror the posture. We're like less than 2 feet away because these tables are jammed up next to each other. His bike is right in front of us. My truck is a little bit off to the side, and I posture myself exactly how he's postured, and I'm just eating chicken. Like crumbs fall wherever they may. So anyway, so that's
is it fried chicken or roasted chicken?
A little bit of both.
Okay, yeah, a little dusting. Gotcha. Okay.
So all right, so that sets up the mood. So every time I go into these like rites of destruction, and they really bring out some weird stuff, like it like invokes equality, which like people follow up and they're like, you wouldn't believe what just happened to me. I'm like, well, yeah, I've come to expect that. So I go down and I'm going to go and meet this couple, and it's I arrive there like 15 minutes early, and then I get like a text like, oh no, the motorhome broke down. We're 14 miles away. And I'm like, par for the course. So I'm just kind of sitting there and I'm doing my thing. Eventually they arrive. And in order to where the rite begins, it's like at this boat drop. So it's a little bit further away than where we take the rest of the tour. And it's where you'd have access to the river. And there's like this really cool thing, which I take them on. But in order to get there, you have to drive through this underpass, which was built in 1909. And it's like not particularly big.
Yeah, I've seen, I think you've shown me the picture of it before. It's like stone.
I think I might have shown you something else.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever shown you. But like the point of this was they drive all the way down this like kind of back road, and they get to the they fix their truck or their motorhome. They get all the way down to this like underpass, and this is like 100 feet from where I'm parked on the other side. They're like, we can't fit.
Of course not. I knew that was coming.
And the problem with their truck was their power steering went out.
Right.
So now like they've got this like 1.5 lane road, like which drops off into the wilderness, and they've got to do this like 15-point turn. And it's like this huge motorhome, like it's right, like it's, and so the road's not particularly well traveled, but I was able to pull out in front of them before they started their escapade, because we're going to go to the second location. And I would kind of pulled over, and I was just going to wait for them to get their motorhome in order. I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden I hear this commotion. And I look in the, like, I'm kind of like facing forward, they're behind me, and I look in the side view mirror, and I see like 5 kids on BMX bikes.
Yeah.
And these kids, so this is part of Marietta, and Marietta's got a rough and tumble side. And these kids are like 1980s, like BMX hooligans. They're
Right.
like yelling at like the couple who came up are probably their mid 60s, and like, you know, they've got this like kind of like hippie looking motorhome, and these kids are like, what are you doing, old people? Get on the road, go back to Florida, F you, like that type of energy.
Right.
Like kids today aren't like that.
Right.
Like that's been sucked out of them. They just, and these kids are on BMX bikes causing trouble wherever they go. And part of me is just kind of laughing.
You're enjoying it.
I'm like, all right, let me see how this is going to unfold. And like it quickly dissipated. So, all right, we go on the tour. We're having this amazing tour. This is a couple who's like getting like the deepest elements of this tour. Like everything's like lining up and blah, blah, blah. And I'm doing some things differently. And I have like kind of like a routine. When you do a tour, you begin to know, like at this point, I talk about this. Like it just makes sense. And so what the purpose of this tour is, the destination is this old structure said to be built in like the early 1800s. It's like 30 feet tall, and it's this square, like on the outside, like masonry brick building, and it's got these 4 entrances that with these arches, and you go inside, it's like easily 20 feet across, and then it's like these huge stones that are circular, that makes a cylinder shape, so it's square on the outside and circular on the inside, and it's open, and you're like, what is this place? And it's where all of like it's where like if you're a prostitute to support a habit, like this is where you bring your John. Like this is
Right.
where like it's got that energy too. Like it's got a really weird energy. It's the destruction site. So anyway, so there's this build up to get there, and the way the path goes is it bends, and I usually time it so that I tell a good story as soon as it opens up and we get to see the furnace site for the first time. And I decided to tell a little bit of a different story. And I'm telling them about the outlaw. That's what I called the guy on the motorcycle. And the 5 boys on BMX bikes, which the couple named Gremlins, which is a perfect description of like the energy they had. They were like they were gremlining. And so I'm telling them about their experience. Actually, I touched it. It was the same 5 BMX boys that I saw with the outlaw biker. I'm telling them all about that just as we go around this turn. And sure enough,
There they
I
are.
see 5 BMX bikes in front of the furnace entrance.
Yep.
So we start walking closer, and it becomes evident that they're going nuts. They're going nuts, and like they're displaying behavior.
The boys or the couple?
The boys.
The boys. Okay.
They're displaying behavior which you just don't see very often. And they're inside this like old relic, and they're like taking huge blocks, and they're trying to smash the wall down. Like everything about it's insane.
Right.
Like, this is like there's like screaming, and they're like this like 4 in the afternoon of a pretty popular, well-traveled, like paved trail through like a nature preserve. And
Right.
they're just acting like soccer hooligans. They're
Right.
literally acting. And so we're walking up, and the couple's like, I think it just makes sense if we keep on walking. And I'm like, this is my tour. I'm not gonna let a couple of gremlins like stop us. So I look inside, and I'm like, all right. Who I'm sizing up like real quickly, like, you know, I'm reading the situation, like I'm meeting them as they are. Like, I mean, this is the way this rite of destruction is unfolding. They've all, like, everyone here knows each other, and we're meeting here. And these people traveled like from Florida to have this experience. We're not going to go and let the gremlin stop them from having it. So I look inside, I try to meet it what it is, and I assess who the leader is. And he's the boy who has almost a full mustache, and he's got the biggest mullet.
Nice.
Right. So I'm like, this is him. This is guy.
Right.
And so I immediately walk right up to him, and I punch him in his face.
didn't.
No, but that if I was in prison, that would be the
Right.
right play. But I'm
Yeah.
not in prison. I'm not in prison. I'm
Right.
close to it. And so I go up to him. I just start talking to him. And before he knows it, he's in a conversation with me. And what my number one idea is, I want him to lead the gremlins away from the
Right.
site. I want to be able to walk this couple in so they can have an experience. And I start asking them, I'm like, have you ever been to like you can go up the back part of the furnace, like the hill goes up and you could climb this wall, and I'm thinking like they would get like just maybe stuck on the wall or something like that. But I underestimated the gremlins, because we go inside the furnace. And all of a sudden we look up and we see all the gremlin heads are like 30 feet above us, standing on top of it. This is like a built structure from the early 1800s. So it goes much, that's the history of it. Like, it's got that feel. It's not like in great condition and there's like trees growing all over it. It's not like a well manicured park. This is just the way it's become over time. So anyway, we're underneath it, and now they're starting to kick stones. Like, they're not kicking it like super aggressively, but it's like we're like in that liminal space. Like, this can get like ugly real fast. And I got my stick with me, and I'd already sized them up. Like, I already knew how, if this was going to go south, how I was going to meet it. But anyway, so I'm looking at this, and then next thing I know, I see walking in front of one of the entrances is the leader.
Right.
And so I'm like, all right, here's my opportunity. So I jump up real quick and I call him over. I call him inside. So I knew that nothing was going to rain down while I was in there. I'm like, what's your name? And he tells me his name. I tell him my name. And I tell him real quickly about the place and about like how powerful it is and the magic. And I'm like, it's dangerous magic. I'm like, that's why you and your hooligan friends are acting the way you are. But you've demonstrated to me, because I give tours to people from all over, you've demonstrated to me that you may be the true guards of this place. And I put out a copy of The Rights to the 40th Parallel. It's filled with maps. It's like written for like a 12-year-old. And I'm like, this is a map to all of the places. I'm giving you this book. I need you and your band of merrymakers to be my guardians when I'm not here. And he's like, okay.
I love it.
That is, if you know how to read inner world, you know how to meet everyone the way you want to meet them.
Well, this is my thought. So first of all, like, it's sounding more and more like the area that you're in is very similar to the Chatsworth Park area, where there's the Manson Tunnel and all of that kind of stuff and whatnot. And so that's kind of interesting. But I'm wondering if, like, what the structure you're describing is some kind of like portal dimensional kind of thing, and if they didn't actually come through from the 80s, right, and that they're trying to find their way back, and they came through there, and they're fucking with it, because you see shit like this at the Manson Tunnel in Chatsworth.
So this was, do you remember there was a movie, I think it was called Over the Edge.
Okay.
It came out in 1979, I believe.
Okay.
It is the first film credit of a young Matt Dillon.
Okay. And
so if you could recall how Matt Dillon was presented in that early 80s outsider time frame.
Yes.
Like, he was the epitome of troubled youth.
Yes.
That was a big movie in Mike's psychological program.
Oh yeah, because it's about a planned community.
Completely.
Well, you know what's interesting? The planned community is called New Granada, right? And one of the neighboring planned communities to the planned community of Chatsworth is called Granada Hills. It's in the same it's in the same hills. That's interesting. Okay, continue.
So, two things. Trip down memory lane. The final, if you want to understand good Hollywood programming, the final scene of that, like, you go through this emotional roller coaster watching it, and then the boys get hauled off to juvie. It's a juvie story. Yeah. And it has the same ending. If you're familiar with the film, it was called, I think it was called Coming Home, where like the guy was on the back of a bus and then they played this very sentimental music. kind of a similar way of how The Outsiders ended with Stay Golden by Stevie Wonder. But I want to say they ended the song with they ended the movie being hauled off to juvie, and they were playing maybe the original version of the song that has the chorus. I'm not going to sing it. I'm going to allow you to. Ooh, ooh, child, things are going to get easier.
Right. Yeah.
Can you sing that for us for a moment? Like
Oh,
that's how it ends. Like you're like this,
child, things are gonna get easier.
no, but it's like this really like rich, sentimental sort of thing. And it's like, the whole generation who went through that with The Outsiders and this and that, like, that's part of like a collective painting. So anyway, the point of it, you are so friggin' right, because those boys exuded that energy. But it also had more of a Southern California sort of like Lords of Dogtowns.
Totally. Okay, so I think this clicked in my head. Maybe BMX bikes are a type. So, and this goes into some of the things that I want to talk about in the second hour, right? For sure. But I'll leave this sort of nugget. Bicycles are becoming of increasing importance in like how I see some of the portal magic. Remember, we talked about Josh Crow and all of that kind of stuff. Remember that story I told about there's this guy who there's like he's on one of the graffiti walls, like one of the murals. And then one day I saw him riding on the trail. Remember I told that story? Like I was like, oh my God, that's the guy who like supposedly is dead, who's on the trail. And he had this energy radiating from here, and he was moving at a pace that was far faster than anyone else. He was definitely not in the same relationship with time as anyone else on the trail. And I've never seen, he was on a bike. He was on a bike. And I've never seen him before that. I've never seen him again, but I'm 100% certain it's the person who's painted. Like almost like he emerged, like he's like this, this character that shows up in this area at specific times, and that sort of memorialization of him is part of like how he conjures the breakthrough kind of thing. He was on a BMX bike.
He was on a BMX bike. Some questions about his style.
Yeah.
So you saying that he was moving faster than
it was just different. It was different. It wasn't
different. It was different. Yeah. What my question is, was there an elegance to it as well?
100%. Like he knew exactly how to like swerve between people so that it didn't disrupt them while he didn't have his rhythm disrupted, right? It was almost as if he was the organizing principle of everything that was going on the trail, right? Like he dictate, like his thing was like the dictating like feature of the scene, right? And he had long hair and there was braids, and he was like like American Indian or some kind of indigenous or Indian kind of thing, right? And he had this like, he looked outside of age, right? Like you couldn't tell, you look at him, you can't tell if he's like 20 or 60, right? And he was not a huge, like probably 5'6" or 5'7", probably 145, wiry, strong, and just moving with a purpose. And there was like, I don't know what it was, if it was just I was seeing aura or if there was a piece of jewelry that was reflecting or something, but there was this energy here on him that like was pretty interesting, right? And I immediately recognized him as the person from that from the mural. And when I looked him up, like there's a name next to that face. Like he had been some sort of like activist for some kind of indigenous something or other, right? But I think probably at this point, his identity has been co-opted by people using it for nonsense. And it was like, I got what his true energy was. And that fucker is a time traveler. That the activist portion, all that stuff, that's lovely and whatever. But like this guy, like, this is his spot that he comes through. He moves through all the different dimensions and realities and timelines and whatever. And this lake is his portal. This is his black hole into and out of everything, right? But he was on a BMX bike. He was not on like a regular, like normal town bike that people ride on or anything like that. It was a BMX bike.
All right. I got a lot to say, a lot to comment upon that. So there once upon a time I used to write this and say this a lot. It was kind of like part of my talking points, but it was that the bicycle is the peak of the relationship between man and machine. Like it never, like there's
I agree.
no, like that's as like
It's as
that's as far as
steampunk as
want to
you
go.
get. It's totally steampunk, like the
Like,
chains and the gears and stuff like that.
but it's self-propagated and you can blend with it in a way which you can. So I the bicycle thing like is getting deeper and deeper for me. Like I used to just hold it on that level, but I think you're so I ride my bike, a different bike and probably a different style, but in the same way on the trails as you described this individual. And when you said that he was kind of, whether he was aware of it or not, as the organizing principle of all that's going on there, like I certainly hold that as my conscious perspective in my mind while I'm doing what I'm doing. And like that gives me the right context to meet the trail. So the question I have, which I'm wondering, is and going back to the point which really started this, was the BMX kids being like bleed throughers. Like, you know, what's the connectivity between like my style of riding and his style of riding? Is that just universally accepted are available to everyone who goes to discover it? Or is it like, you know, are we tapped into the same thing? Are we bleeding through into the other, you know, is the other one? Like, I don't know, but like, it made me think about the 80s kids, because I had the same thought, like, you know, as I to myself, I'm like, you know, what was that? Like, did I literally give the rights of the 40th parallel into the hands of someone who's going to go back into 1980 with that to bleed, like bleed through like Back to the Future sort of stuff, but in reverse, and not with an almanac, but with the rights of the 40th parallel? Did I just bring that back in time?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also I think
and was that me?
Part of the reason he completely accepted what you said was because he had just experienced it, and you were validating his experience and also making him part of it in a way that he was like, okay, like, you know, like this is now my purpose and this is whatever. So, yeah, no, I mean, it's making me think about a story that Andrew Bashago told me about what happened to him in that area of Chatsworth one time. And then also, have you watched that documentary about Val Kilmer? I think I mentioned it on a show like maybe last year or earlier.
I've never seen it, but I know the one you're talking about.
Okay, it's excellent. I think you would actually really like it. It is something that is worth, you know, worth your time at the box to watch it. But when he's talking about his childhood growing up in Chatsworth and the things that he used to do with his brothers, a little bit different, but like for some reason I was thinking about that. Right. And so these are two people who have had very fascinating lives, Andrew Bashago and Val Kilmer, like in completely different ways, but like, you know, sort of all coming from that same kind of spot. They were in that same area that I was experiencing, and a person cannot interact with that without it affecting the course of the rest of their life if they don't intentionally like do everything they can to sort of shut it down. Right. You know, like I think there's a lot of people who grew up in Chatsworth who are just, you know, they're just plain Jane, boring people because they have chosen to be. Right. But if you continue to ask the question about the mystery that was never solved from your childhood, the only option is like a totally out of bounds, ridiculous life, right? Which I'm having, which Andrew Bashago is having, which Val Kilmer is having. And there are benefits to it and consequences to it. And, you know, and we've all experienced that. And, you know, Val Kilmer is experiencing that in a pretty hefty way right now, right? Yeah, I think, I mean, Val Kilmer is exactly the kind of person you're talking about when you're describing these boys. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Can I ask you a question about your tours?
Yes.
Has any portion of your tour or your like work on the Susquehanna been Mandela affected or augmented? Have you ever shown up to a place to give a talk on something and you're like, what the fuck, dude, it's not here anymore, or it's completely changed, or this is not how I remember it, what the fuck?
Huh. It's an interesting question.
Because you've given it enough times that you're very familiar with the terrain, right? But I don't like, sometimes we get so familiar with it that like we just when the changes happen, like it goes smoothly inside of our mind, so we don't notice it. Or depending on the kind of person, like anytime there's a little change, you're like, what the fuck? Right. But have you ever showed up trying to talk about something and you're like, wait a second, this story makes no sense anymore?
What I'm more aware of, like, is, and how I meet it is, it's 100% about the people who are there.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have, like, the reason I'm in pause, because I've never thought about them as the Mandela, as a Mandela effect, or like changing things. I definitely think that the boys on the BMX would meet that. But there have been so many uniquely strange, not just strange, but uncommon. Like if I were to go and look and say, like, well, how often would that sort of thing happen? And I would say rarely. Like I see that frequently. I don't see it on every tour. And so I know it's bumping up against something which is in the mystic.
Well, I have to say, I have to think that that's because you're focused on a spot that is like some kind of like portal or interdimensional crossover or like timeline confuser or bleeder. And while you have been around that area for a long time, right? So you have, it's kind of like people who are used to driving in the snow or the ice because they grew up in that. Like you understand, you navigated a certain way. For a lot of people, they just went through the portal for a first time. And so you're seeing the strange, the effects of an experience that one hasn't even registered yet and certainly hasn't resolved. And I think there has to be some effect on like cognition or the body based on like frequency, right? Like a lot of people, like some people think in order to do that, you have to like dematerialize and rematerialize. And so if things aren't put back together quite the same way, or if like just it's kind of like changing the radio stations, right? If you change from rock music to pop music or to classical music, it takes a while to adjust your ear. And so like could be disorienting if it's happening on a full environmental like level. And so I think for you, A, you're weird, but B, you've spent a lot of time at the weird place. So like that's your normal, right? But for a lot of these people, whether they went to visit that area on a vacation or whether like they accidentally came on through because that's in the backyard of where they live or whatever, they're having that what the fuck for the first time. And you're experiencing the strange, the disoriented behavior.
That's probably fair.
Yeah.
Do you think the people on the tours, they are going through the portal? Like, how do they fit in?
So I think, I mean, like most of the people, I mean, I don't know what is the source of most of your clients, if it's mostly from like YouTube or online stuff, or if it's local people who've heard about you other ways, right? So I think that would, depending on like the set of information that people come loaded with and their true understanding of you and your work, right? Where they meet that is part of it. But also like you're a guide, right? So it's like somebody who's on their ayahuasca journey with a good shaman versus someone who's on the ayahuasca journey by themselves for the first time or with a bad shaman or whatever, right? I understand there's all kinds of controversy around shamans and should you do it. I'm just using an example here, right? So my guess would be that I don't want to say whatever the experience might be is muted, but you're telling a story that they're focused on the whole time. So when you have something to focus on, it's a lot harder to get disoriented than when you don't have something to focus on. Right. So your story is the like thing that keeps them tethered to some form of stable reality. You become like the anchor. Right. So I think it would be very different if they I'm sure people do go and visit the area that you've talked about without you. But my guess would be we don't hear from most of these people if they had a weird experience. And then the other thing is, I think a lot of times people have a weird experience and they don't even recognize that they had one and that they were acting strangely. right? I think that that's actually part of the reason most people don't believe a lot of the things that you and I say, is because when they have the experience, like it's too far of an outlier, their mind just like completely just dumps it, right? Or hides it away in a place that is really deeply buried. And most people are not, sort of don't do the level of self-exploration or whatever to sort of grab it. I'm thinking about like with the body and food, right? So unless a person has literally like the kind of anaphylactic type of allergy to a food, right, which like makes their throat close up or, kind of thing, my experience with people is if they eat something that their body doesn't really love one time or doesn't know what to do with, right? Like kind of one time, it just dumps it. They might have a little diarrhea or something like that, but it's just like, I don't know what this is. I'm just going to throw it away. If you continue to give it to it, then the body goes, oh, I guess I have to make sense of this because this is the thing I'm going to be getting for nutrition now. And that's when you'll start to have like weird reactions and stuff like that. So I think a lot of people might have this one very anomalous kind of thing, and it's so foreign to their body that it's like, I don't know what this is, I'm dumping it. And that just, they move on, and it's almost like they can't even remember it happened if they recognize it happening in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. So, okay, there's two things I want to talk about before we go into the supporter segment. So, well, maybe they're the same thing. I don't know. So the next episode of Project Kids is episode number 33. Right. And so I was trying to think about something that would be interesting to do for episode number 33.
Okay.
Right. And there's two things that come to mind. One of them is, if you recall, several months back, probably almost a year ago, I received a gift number 33 that we didn't really dive into and explore in any great depth, because it was just too, like, there were so many, every time I tried to look into it, like it could overtake like all of my time digging into it. And at that point, I couldn't. And I feel like I have a little bit more space in my mind, weirdly, now for some of that exploration. And also the way we do things now is we've evolved. So I thought we could possibly do that. On the
33rd show.
On the 33rd show, okay, of Project Kids.
Yeah, that sounds
right. I'm torn between this because one is highly symbolic, and the other one I think is more sort of grounded, and I don't want to say more meaningful because it's not. Both things could be very meaningful, but they're just completely different in how these people approach me and how these people integrate into what we do, because both they do. The other thing I was thinking, we haven't had a guest in a long time. Okay. And I was thinking maybe for 33, because probably this person's work has integrated a lot of the stories we've told in a different way than other people have, is have FPV Angel for our 33rd to come and play that sort of game with us in terms of, it's public. So, right, like the glass bead game is all private, and we've spoken, it's interwoven into our work in so many ways that I would want to make it so that people could sort of hear it. But I think the thing that I like about the FPV Angel stuff so much, because I don't even know if I agree with everything. I don't know, right? They have so much work out there, it's impossible. But I think it's meaningful in the way, like, when in the show we just did with Howdy, that'll be out before this one. Like in the beginning, we were talking about that video you did a year and a half ago, where you were like, there was like the greater reality thinking, right? And then there was the like inside the matrix thinking. I think where their work meets us is in that spot. The thing that they're talking about is the greater reality, but it is the structure upon which certain individuals, groups, or systems have learned to project something else, right? So it's kind of the scaffolding that exists between matrix consciousness and the greater reality, right? And it supports both things, right? And so that was my thought. So I'd be open to hearing from you or any of the audience.
Is there any reason to have FPV Angel on the 33rd episode other than the fact that 33 is a cool number? Is there a connection to 33?
Yeah, because I think obviously 33 is like the sort of Masonic lore kind of thing.
Right.
And I think that that system that they're describing, awareness and understanding of that comes at the 33rd degree. Like that is like that when you get to that spot, you understand the underlying makeup of how reality is constructed. Right. Like, I think I think that it's one of the, I don't know if I want to say great, like most greatly guarded secrets, but I think it's like, understanding that is very similar to whatever that line is in Masonry, right? On the other side of that, you understand how to construct realities, worlds, universes, paradigms, all of that kind of stuff. Right.
All right. So my suggestion would be, I think they're both great ideas. Symbolically speaking, that the box in 33, that's a much stronger story connected to 33 than the 33 connected to FPV Angel.
Okay.
So what I would say is we could have the FPV Angel on like anytime.
Well, I guess we could have them on 34. Like once we pass the 33rd degree, we get to understand.
Maybe that makes sense.
Okay.
So there we go. So I would think like that would be the way to go and approach that.
Okay.
That's how I would navigate that.
Okay, so we'll do that. So that'll be next month, and then I will see if FPV wants to join us for number 34. Once we have passed the 33rd degree, then we are ready for understanding the greater reality.
Ready.
I think there was one other thing that came up during the course of the talking that I wanted to address. I'm trying to think. I feel like there was one hanging Chad left that I guess I can't think of. Right. I'm trying to think of what it was. Did you ever talk to the big biker guy?
No, he was a man of no words. No words. We literally sat there next to each other, like 2 feet apart for 3 minutes in total silence.
Isn't it? It's funny to do that stuff sometimes, right? Like, and like wonder what he was thinking while you were sort of doing it. But it's funny that you ate all your chicken in 3 minutes.
I mean, I made up the number 3 minutes, but I definitely probably ate that fast. So yesterday, I'll tell you, I was out on an afternoon walk or late morning walk, excuse me. And right when I walked past the Amish schoolhouse they let out, and they all were playing baseball. Yeah. And that was really cool to be able to watch the Amish kids in their Amish outfits playing baseball.
Do they play it normal or do they play it with like sticks and stones?
Good question. They played it with, I don't know what their ball was, but they had a regular bat.
They had a regular bat. So
no one had gloves. So it's more like a baseball-esque game. But we were in the positions and there was a pitcher and like they would run to the bases and all of that.
In general, what is the Amish sort of relationship to athletics and sports? Obviously, for some of them, their life is very physical because a lot of it is around like farming and building and creating and stuff like that. But do they have like do they play sports? Like, I'm not talking about like organized in a league or whatever, but do you see that going on there? Yeah, or is that the first time?
Really a really interesting question. You want me to answer that now? It's
yeah, answer it now.
So, yes, they have a very strong relationship to the physical body. Like you'll see
Mm-hmm.
them, like they're great roofers and they don't ever have shoes on and they're jumping off the roof. They're like, you know, it's crazy to watch them. So every once in a while, you see that show itself in other aspects of like physicality, like athleticism or like a sport, like brings that body awareness, you know, and it's kind of fun. So on a basic level, their primary solo form of transportation is a scooter. They don't use a bicycle. And so it's two big wheels, like easily like 12 inches in diameter, one on the front, one on the back. And then there's like it's almost like a skateboard deck like
I
that.
see it. Okay, I'm looking at it right now. Tell me if this is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
More so the ones with the two small wheels,
Okay.
smaller wheels.
This one?
So like that blue one looks right. Yeah, like that.
Okay.
That one looks like a real modern one. Most of them look like the picture directly below him where yes, him.
Okay, this is fucking fascinating. Okay.
And they're like, you see them on that and watching them go up and down hills and I recognize that there's a skill, meaning like you can get better and better because I see some of them are amazing on it and they have a lot of fun. So like I know that exists. And then the last thing is I have seen Amish softball teams and they're good. Oh, and there's this every once in a while, like in a Lancaster 5K or maybe half marathon, you'll see like one or two Amish runners and they're in complete Amish attire and sneakers. Women in the full outfit, men in the full outfit.
Okay. All right. Wow, this is kind of fucking fascinating. And this is a great place. I'm gonna tell you this little bit and then we're gonna move into the second segment. Right. So they're definitely fucking time travelers and you have to be fit, right? They're like the way you describe them is more like the fitness of a free runner or a person who does parkour, like the ability to meet whatever challenge arises in the most efficient way. Okay.
I would imagine like that would be like somewhere like there's an Amish boy or girl who's like 12 years old who'd be the best parkour like in the history.
100%.
Like how you should see how they just naturally are.
Yes. Okay. So those scooters. So there's these, we've talked about the bird scooters around town and how I'm like, the scooters have something to do with time travel because I see them in the lake and is there any fucking rhodium on them or whatever, right? Kind of thing. So there's another kind of scooter called Lime. Okay. And these are scooters that are owned by Uber, right? So I want you to look at the Lime scooter right now. Look at this. And then look at that scooter that we decided was the right one.
All right. Okay.
There's a pretty significant similarity in terms of, now think about this. These Lime scooters they're tracked, right? Like you order them through Uber. And so they've got GPS in them. They've got the ability to like QR code them or attach your credit card to them. So they're tracking you wherever you go on these. Right. So maybe the veil is very thin and they've decided that like, okay, so we're going to put these scooters out. These are good travel devices, but we have everyone tagged so we can follow them wherever we go. And we see who, like how far off road can you go with this kind of thing? Right. It was weird when I was leaving. I was working at ACL for the last 2 weekends and we'll talk about that in the second hour. But the other night when I was trying to leave there, when I was trying to get an Uber, it was like not offering me, it wouldn't let me get a car. It was just kept trying to force me onto a Lime scooter or a Lime bike, right? And here's the Lime bike. Okay. So, and like, here's a look, it's in the water. Like I see this all the time in Austin, right? So we got Lime scooters, Lime bikes, right? They look quite a bit like this, but this is fucking analog and the other is fucking digital. Like, right? Like it's being tagged for your travel or free running. They're fucking free runners, right? So to me, this is like, I'm getting clearer and clearer on what these people are, the Amish people. They don't want metal in their fucking body because they don't want to be tracked throughout dimensions, timelines, and realities. Their entire existence is to stay away from metals that get in your body, and to the extent that you cannot help it, because some of them are part of nature and not necessarily bad for you, wanting to not be attached to the system that pings off of that and uses that as some sort of like internet of bodies, things, whatever kind of thing. So they have devised ways of travel, ways of being, ways of eating, and all of that, and clothing too. I'm assuming that their clothing has many, many purposes beyond just aesthetic or functionality, right? Like there's probably like, right? They are trying to be as obscured by the system that lays in between the matrix and the greater reality as possible. While still being able to do what they do. They're fucking like these are like the Amish are like gang members and hobos and all of this kind of stuff their own way. Like there's many different expressions of this, but my guess would be that these are the key people, the average people. When I say average, I don't mean that they're less intelligent, but they're not like these wealthy billionaires, secret, trying to control everyone else. They are the best, like everyday human being keepers of this knowledge and these methods, right? And that was just that scooter is everything. And what we were talking about with the guy on the BMX bike, right? There's something about two-wheelers. Remember when you were little of like how exciting it was when you could finally ride a two-wheeler and didn't have to have like training wheels or a tricycle anymore? There's something about that two-wheeler that represents freedom, balance, like the ability to navigate spaces and things like that, that is like really, really important. And that, I think that we forget at a certain point, we don't ride our bike anymore, right? Now there's a lot of kids, we saw like a little 4-year-old riding a two-wheeler bike really well the other day. And I'm like, wow, he's 4. My 8-year-old nephew just learned to ride a two-wheeler. Like, why is it being delayed so much? Like kind of weird shit like that, right? So, a man and his bike, a person in his bike, a woman in their bike, like there's your point about that being like where man meets machine, like that's for the individual. And then that thing I was talking about with FPV Angel is like the part for like the larger reality. It's a very similar thing, I think.
All right.
All right, cool. All right. We're going to move over into the supporter segment, patreon.com/offplanetmedia, projectkids.locals.com, or rockfin.com/Emily Moyer. And if you enjoy our content or our work or our conversations or whatever this nonsense is, and you would like to do it on a weekly basis, Glass Bead Game is available in those places for subscribers at the Project Kids level. Okay, it's not on Rockfin, but you can do it on Locals or on Patreon. And Michael, if you talked a lot about your tours, if somebody listening to this wants a tour, what's the best way to get in touch with you for that?
Probably email. The scheduled tours for the calendar year is complete.
Okay, so only private tours right now.
Only private tours.
All right. And one of your email addresses doesn't work anymore because it bounces back to me every time. I always sent it to like both iterations of your email address.
Yeah, I think there's something weird like
your website
yes.
Okay, so do you want to tell people which email address to contact you at, or you just want them to go to your website? Is that working?
mkwan@comcast.net.
MK1, right? As opposed to MK Ultra. You just right. MK1, it's its own mind control program.
MKWANN@comcast.net.
All right, sounds good. We'll see you guys on the other side. Bye-bye.